Hello. I think today is mostly going to be sketching and drawing because that's the phase that I am in for this painting. I just started working on this earlier this morning. And it is a piece that's going to be watercolor. Do I like turtles? Yes, I do like turtles. That's a random question. What's bringing that one on? Anyway, I was in the middle of saying that this is a piece in progress that I plan to use for the cover for the Undying Tales book that I am planning to release sometime within the next month or two. This is a project that I initially wanted to actually release back in March, but certain world events happened which made that not such a good choice. So it got shelved for a while, and it's kind of been sitting on the back burner now for a good 3 months, 3 or 4 months. But I was thinking that I do still want to move ahead with this project, and so it has been revived. And it is going to be a book, just a little collection of the pieces that I did for my Undying Tales series of ink drawings back in October of 2019. Some of you might recall that, and if you don't recall it, you can go and check in my Instagram archives and you can see the creatures and things that I did for that project. So I plan to make this into a collectible edition little book like I did with my 2018 ink drawings. This one was a little pictorial story of Fox and Floof and their adventures through a sort of world that draws in a lot of Chinese mythology elements, like dragons and the ley lines of the earth, and moon rabbits, and immortal peaches, or peaches of immortality. Anyway, so that was a little book that I did a year and a half ago, and I was planning to do something similar for my Undying Tales series of images. So this is the design that will be for the cover. So just like this one has this gold embossed cover on linen, it's going to be a similar thing for Undying Tales. And so this is my initial design. But I'm also going to do, which I did not do for Odyssey, I'm also going to do a paper, a soft cover version of the book, an open edition soft cover. So this is over here going to be the cover image for that. So it's going to be, it's similar to this design, but it's going to be painted in watercolors. So working on it. How's everyone's week been so far? I went for a hike this weekend because I've decided on what the next butterfly I want to paint for my butterfly series is going to be. I came across the butterfly, when I was at my local Berkeley Botanical Garden last week. There's this teeny tiny little butterfly, and it's sort of a bluish white color, and it was only about that big, like the size of my thumbnail. You know, about 1 centimeter wings. It's this teeny little thing, and I got a few good photos of it landing on some of the native California plants, and I figured out what it was when I got home. It was a Melissa blue. I guess it has a cousin, a subspecies in the northeastern United States that is an endangered species, because there's very, very few of them left there. But the ones that we have here are a little bit more plentiful. But I love that it was so teeny tiny. And so I looked it up. It's called Melissa Blue. And I was looking up what kind of plants it needs for host plant and nectar, because that's what I'm doing with that series, where I have the butterflies in this kind of circular format. Here, let me show you, in case you missed these. Here's one of them. So I'm doing a whole series of butterflies like this with their host plants. Anyway, so the Melissa Blue feeds on and uses a lot of lupine. And there are many different versions, many different subspecies of that here. And I knew the perfect place to go where I could get lots of photos of lupine. Although it's not quite the season anymore for the flowering, so I was only able to get a few flower photos, but I got enough. So that's what I was doing this weekend. I dragged my daughter out to a really hot, sunny hike, and she moaned at me and complained for the first half of it until we got into the shade. But I got my flower reference photos. So mission was accomplished, and secondary mission of dragging my 10-year-old out for some exercise was also accomplished. And the third goal of dragging myself out for exercise was also accomplished. So it was a successful weekend. Hello, everyone joining now. As always, if you have any random questions, feel free to interrupt me at any point to ask. Happy to answer anything related to art or random subjects, or about what I'm working on now and doing. So I'm using a 0.2 lead. I have a mechanical pencil for drawing this. I used to use 0.3s until I found these orenz, which I really like. Well, I try to keep my pencil lines neat so that I don't have too much excess lead, graphite loose on the page for when I start painting, because that just muddies up the colors a bit, and keeping things minimal lets your colors be a bit more pure. That's why I use such a thin lead as well, because again, that means less graphite on the page. And I think this is 2H hardness. I think with 0.3 pencils, I usually bump that up to HB. But when it's so thin like this, it breaks easily. And so I shift it to a slightly harder 2H. Where did I get this one? I got this on Jet Pens. They've got two versions of it. There's this one, which is a slightly more expensive, but it has a auto advancing lead feature so that you don't have to actually, do this to get your lead to come out to advance. It just automatically keeps your lead at the ready for you as you draw, because there's some sort of, I don't even know how it works. It's just a neat gizmo in there that somehow detects when the lead has gotten too short, and it will just bump it out a little bit more. So this one is a little bit more expensive. They have a cheaper version, I think, which is like $12 or $8 or something like that. Same brand, which doesn't do the auto advancing, but I've heard from someone who uses it, and she said that she likes it just fine as well. So yeah, either of them. Yeah, it is Pentel. It says very tiny. I don't know if you could see it there. It says orenz, Pentel, and underneath the Pentel says PP3002. I don't know if that's a model number or what, but that's what it says there. Okay, Rachel, I think you were the one that probably told me about having the cheaper one. I think that one's like $8 to $12 or something in that range. Am I right about that? And I think this one is maybe $30. Yeah, I like this pencil a lot. I tried a point two once before, several years ago, and I remember getting really frustrated that the lead kept breaking. And I think that one didn't have the protective sleeve that comes out with the lead, and so it breaks a lot easier than when it's so thin. But this is kind of my go-to now for whenever I'm sketching onto my final paint surface. I like to use thicker leads when I am in earlier phases of sketching. Just because it helps me to just get an idea down when I can have, I don't know, broader strokes and shading and stuff. And this is such a fine point that it's more of an exact mechanism tool than something for getting a larger concept out of your head and onto the page. No, this is not a metal base. It looks like it, but it is, I think it's some kind of, it's like a resin. It's heavier than plastic, so, but it's lighter than metal. So it's something in between there. I'm not quite sure exactly what it's made of. I think it's resin. Auntie Knows says, my mom got me a calendar of your art when I was young, and I've always loved it. Thank you for the inspiration and the pen review too. You're welcome. I'm so glad that you enjoyed the calendar. I've had a lot of people asking me about a 2021 calendar. Unfortunately, I'm not the one producing them. That's my publisher, Llewellyn. And so you can, if you like calendars, you can ask them for it to renew the Shadowscapes calendar. I have to keep directing people there because they keep asking me to make it again, and I say, sorry, I'm not the one making it. Do I like the rectangle mono eraser or the round? My rectangle one seems to have a different eraser in it that smears more than erases. Yeah, I actually don't like this one. But I haven't gotten new erasers yet for my round one. And so that is waiting around. I don't know where it is even. The round one is definitely my preferred, but since I don't have anything else right now, this is what I've been using. Anachronistic Atelier says, I love 4H2 when I don't scratch my paper with it. Yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes I drop my pencil and it just like jabs straight into the paper and leaves this gouge in there. And then I go, no. And this is a piece where I didn't actually do much advanced sketching before starting to paint, not paint, but doing this sketch. I pretty much did this directly onto my paper. I just had this as my guide. So I knew that I wanted that general shape and form, but aside from that, I'm just kind of working on this as I go. Toile Catan, I own your tarot deck and many of your books, and I was wondering if you still are planning one day on finishing the Dream Dance Oracle. I do have the intention to finish it someday, but I have just not been able to fit it in recently. So it's been hard just keeping up with the contracts and obligations that I've got going, and I do want to finish it someday. But for now, I don't have any set date or any knowledge of when that might be. Do I know what colors this piece is going to be? No, I do not yet. I'm going to have to figure that out soon. Because I am getting to that point where I'm going to need to make some color decisions. I think I'm going to be making it, the bird at least, my rainbowy phoenix type of color scheme, where I do like the orange and teal blue combination. But I'm not positive about that. we'll just have to see once the paint comes out where it leads me, because I really don't have any set plans for this. But I think the background will not be terribly busy. It's probably going to be some textural, maybe gold leaf textural thing that I do, because it has to have the title of the book over here, so I don't want too much going on. This is 130-pound Moulin de Roy paper, so it's fairly thick. I like 300-pound just because it doesn't warp much. Then even with all the many layers and much buildup that I do, especially when I start using the gold leaf and watercolor ground the way I do. I do have some 140-pound that I use every once in a while as well. It's actually older batch of paper that I bought that I'm still making my way through from before I found that I liked Moulin de Roy. Don't get attached to Moulin de Roy if you're watching this and decide to check it out, because it is also discontinued now, so you can still buy it, but they are not going to be making any more of it. So eventually the distributors will run out of it. Right now, I think you can still find it in places. But this is the 300-pound hot press. And this is going to be a pearl in the center with sort of a wreath of plants there. It's hard to tell in the sketch right now what it is because there's so much going on with the feathers and things, but those will be plants and berries and leaves. Actually, I haven't decided yet even if I'm going to have any background. It may just be sort of a vignette thing. I might just keep it that way. Do I have a preference for hot versus cold press? I generally prefer hot press for my work. I like to do a lot of very fine, tight detail, and so I find that cold press gets in the way, the texture gets in the way for me, and I prefer instead to have just the very smooth paper. I know some people don't like this paper that I use. They think it's too smooth, or that the sizing just doesn't do well for their techniques. And it's interesting how every artist and each person's technique can make you have preferences for very subtle differences in paper. Okay, I think that sketch is done. So I always like to scan my sketches before I paint, especially since sometimes when I do my more randomizing techniques where I'm just throwing a lot of stuff all over my page and getting really messy, my pencil sketch can get completely obscured in the process. So I like to scan it and make sure I have a clean version of it, at least on my computer, so that I can refer to it later on if I need to. Refer to the scan, I mean. So I'm going to do that right now, and meanwhile, while it's scanning, I'm going to be working on some little sketch cards that I've got. Little ink sketch cards. What scanner do I use? I have an Epson Expression. I'm checking the model number because I actually don't remember it. Epson Expression 12,000 XL. XL is it's an extra large, oversized scan bed because I frequently work at larger than 8.5 by 11 size, and so it means that there are fewer pieces for Photoshop to stitch together for me. And even this, not this right here, but the sketch that I was just working on a second ago, even that is larger than a normal office scanner would be able to accommodate because it is 11 by 11 inches. But I've used Epson's scanner for probably over 15 years. Before this one, I had the previous incarnation, and the only reason I upgraded was because my computer kept getting upgraded and I could no longer acquire the hardware to plug in my scanner. My previous one was perfectly fine and it did great. It scanned wonderfully. But then I upgraded my computer and then I could no longer get a SCSI port. And so then I think I managed to find like a $200 SCSI USB conversion thing, and I managed to coast on that for a while, but eventually even that became so outdated that it was no longer a thing. Like, no one wanted to bother doing a SCSI converter for scanners. Like, who wanted to do that anymore? And so when that was gotten rid of, I considered for a while just setting up my old computer down in the garage and using it just for scanning, but that became such a pain to deal with, having to run down over to my garage every time I wanted to scan something, that I just eventually upgraded my scanner. And it is better than the old one. The new model is better. But I was reluctant to make that change for a long time, since it was also kind of expensive. Sorry, just dealing with the scanning thing over here on the side. And I scan at 600 DPI usually. What size is this scanner? It, I believe, is 13 by 19 inches. Which is usually big enough for about half of the pieces I do. I frequently go larger than that. Now this is one of the sketch cards that I do when people order the Shadowscapes Tarot from me. They get to pick a keyword for me to do a sketch. And this person chose dragon. And sometimes when I do these, they end up triggering an idea for a painting. So every once in a while, these little sketch cards gets turned into a much more involved piece. But I have fun doing them. What type of printer do I use? I don't use a printer. I just have a laser printer for doing documents and things, but I send out for other people to do my artwork printing needs. And this is a pen. It is a gel pen. Pilot Juice Up. Okay, now my Phoenix is scanned. Let me save that. And yes, I do save them as TIFFs. I save all my scanned files. Yeah, no, this is a pen, not a brush. I would draw with brush on this, except for the cards that I use, that I have for these. They don't take brush very well, because I make these to match the tarot cards as much as possible. So it's just not a good surface for a brush pen. Or else I would love to use that on here. What's a good idea, Rachel? Did I miss something there in the chat? This is a little bit of a mix of an Eastern and Western dragon. It's got a much more sinuous form than most Western dragons tend to have. But it's not quite the full snake form of Chinese dragons. Oh yeah, watercolor on coated paper does not work well. It's almost as bad as watercolor on newsprint. I was talking about that last week when I went to a convention. I was supposed to do a demo class of watercolor painting, and they told me, you know, don't bring any supplies. We've got you covered. You don't need to bring anything. And I got there, and they had newsprint for us to work on, so it was a challenge. Yeah, I get these printed to match the tarot cards, and then I have to trim the corners, but these are actual cards. Well, this is the German edition of the cards. I think it's in like 10 different languages now. Yeah, the newsprint did turn to mush mostly. I wish I had taken pictures of the results of what we did. I think we managed somehow. I don't remember what we did. We had fun, but it was also extremely frustrating at the outset because, you know, I get there expecting that we can do some real watercolor painting, and we've got a big pile of newsprint. Yay! After that, I always brought my own supplies with me when I was doing convention demos. I did not trust them to supply, unless they asked me specifically, like, what do you want, exact brands and things, and then I could tell them the very exact things that they could provide. Now, speaking of conventions, so I was supposed to be an artist guest at NASFIC in Columbus, Ohio in August, which of course is not happening, but they are going to be having an online event instead, and I am going to be doing some talks and demos and things for that. So I think it's like a month away from now. It's coming up. What if someone has the cards but wants to get a sketch card? I do have an aceo option on shadowscapes.com. So if you go for that and send me a private note, and I can do it on one of these card backs instead. Oh, are you in Columbus, Ohio? Well, I am not going to be in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, all the conventions canceled. I don't do too many conventions these days. I just do a couple each year. But that was going to be one of them that I was going to be at this year. think I want to do one more of these before I switch back over. Where was the labyrinth that I posted earlier in my photos? That is over at Sibley Volcanic Preserve in Oakland, California. It doesn't look like a volcano or a volcanic area because I think it was very, very long ago. And then it was turned into a quarry. And now it is a preserve where people can go hiking. But because it used to be a quarry, there is a lot of loose stone just everywhere. And people have created a labyrinth. They've created several labyrinths there, actually, throughout the trail system. There's a few spots. The one I had in that picture is the biggest one. And it's one of our favorite places to go hiking. Although these days it's kind of really crowded. I have never seen the labyrinth so well defined as it was this time. We go there usually about once a year. There's a lot of little trails and places that we like to go hiking around here, so that's one of them that we go to. But usually when we go there, there's no one else on the actual or in the actual labyrinth. But this time there were at least 3 families that were kind of waiting their turns to walk along it. And because so many people have been walking along it, the weeds are all beaten into submission. Usually that's kind of what makes the labyrinth a little bit less defined. It's that the weeds and plants and wildflowers and things start growing in because not enough people are walking along it. But that is not the case right now because everyone is bored and stuck at home and stir crazy and going hiking a lot. So it is seeing many visitors. Yeah, it's got to be a really old volcanic area. I should probably read all the information they have over there, but I never have. My daughter probably knows more about it than I do because she's gone to at least 3 field trips there. But it's definitely not active by any means, and not for a very, very long time. So the subject for this sketch card that the person requested was bird's nest. I was walking with my daughter to her friend's house a couple weeks ago. She wanted to drop off some little presents for her friend and a letter, and we hung out outside their front door for a little bit while we were there. And her friend's mother turns to me and is like, "Go check out that bush over there and pull the branches aside, because there's a bird's nest there." And I went over and looked, and I stood in front of it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so cute. I can see them." And she says, No, you have to actually pull the branches apart. Just like spread them like this." And I said, No, I don't need to. I could see them, because there's these tiny little robins that were peeping inside the bush. They were very loud. But she comes over. She says, "No, you gotta push the branches aside." And as soon as she pushes them aside, these little robins poked their heads way up high because they assume that when the bushes get rustled, Mom is coming back in to feed them. What kind of pen am I using? This is a Pilot Juice Up 0.3. They have 0.4 and 0.5 as well. Yeah, I'm pretty happy to chill out at home too. Well, by home I mean with the trails and things around me. And I'm lucky that I can actually usually get out on them on weekdays during the daytime. Weekend is when places get really crowded. Weekends and after 3 p.m. in the afternoon. But because I have more control over my own schedule, I can usually swing it so that I can head out during the less crowded times and usually have most of the places to myself. So I like doing that. But I really wanted to head out yesterday because I wanted to get those reference photos of wildflowers for the butterfly painting I had in mind. I don't know when I'll get a chance to start on that, but there's nothing worse than being all set to start on something and then not having the materials or the reference that you need at hand. So I wanted to make sure that I had that stuff ready to go for when the opportunity arose and I could start working on that painting. Do I change pens in a drawing for different line weights? Sometimes I do, but not for something that's this small. If I'm doing a more elaborate piece that is going to have a lot more shading and variation, then yeah, I would switch sometimes. But for this, I pretty much just stick with the one. Is the ink water soluble or no? No, it is not. But well, I mean, I guess it is, but it doesn't really, it's not going to lift the way watercolor lifts, so it will smear is more what would happen if you got it wet. So it's not waterproof, but I wouldn't really call it water soluble either. Do I use this pen for paintings or just for sketching? I only use it for sketching. I actually don't use any line work in my paintings. Except for, I guess, those more impromptu sessions sometimes that you see me do here on Instagram and where I just am kind of playing with my materials. And so then I'll use ink, but I don't really even then use it for line specifically. I use it more as a textural thing because I like to use inks that are not waterproof because then I can let the color smear and spread within the washes and intermingle with the watercolors and create more interesting colors and textures and all that stuff. Alright, I think I'm going to switch back over, maybe do the very beginnings of that Phoenix painting. there's that. Okay, now where's my Phoenix? It's still inside my scanner. Okay. So first thing I'm going to have to do is to tape this down to my board. And I use just artist tape. It's just an acid-free masking tape. And because I'm actually running low on tape, I'm going to split this in half. Because I actually normally use the thinner stuff to tape my things down, but I ran out of that, and I haven't yet gotten around to ordering more. So I just tape down the edges. And I do all four sides, even if it seems like two is enough, or just the corners, because if you tape the whole thing down, then that means that when the paper gets really wet and starts to buckle, as long as it is still taped down, it will flatten back out when it is dried. So you want to tape down all sides of it so that it can retain, I should just the other way, retain that flat form. How many pieces do I finish in a week? Well, it depends on what you qualify as a piece. Do you count those little ink drawings that I did just now as pieces? Some weeks I do some larger quantity of small paintings, and other weeks I am just working on one large piece that will take 2 or 3 weeks total time to complete. So it varies greatly from one week to the next. Do I wet the paper before taping to stretch it? No, I do not. Especially because the paper that I'm using is fairly thick to begin with, and so it's not going to warp when it's done. It's just nice and flat. With 300 pound, 140 pound, it does sometimes get a little bit warped even being taped down, but what you can do with it is you can just lightly spray the back side of it when you're done, and then flatten it between things. I use some of the unused glass from picture frames because I always replace picture frames glass with plexiglass instead. And so I have a lot of the discarded glass that isn't used for anything else, and so that's a good use for it for me. I can use that to flatten a piece, just weigh it down and let it sit overnight. Alright. My normal size ones. How many paintings do I do in my normal size ones? I don't really have any normal size ones. Honestly, I just have such a wide range because I do like little teeny tiny ones, and then sometimes I do 4x6s, and then this one is 12 by 12 inches, and then I have others that are 16 by 20. So, I mean, I guess I could tell you how long it takes me instead to do something, like the little ones that you've seen me do sometimes in these live sessions, like the one I did last week. Let's see if I can find that. This guy. This is the one I did last week. I did that in an hour. But this was one where I had no planning whatsoever. Nothing that I plotted out ahead of time, composition-wise or anything, beyond the idea that I wanted to do thistles. And so this one was a piece that took an hour versus something like, you know, this isn't a huge amount bigger than that piece, but this probably took 50 hours. So it not only depends on the size, but it depends on the type of piece that it is. You know, something this detailed and so controlled takes much more time than that little one. The difference between glass and plexiglass. Plexiglass won't shatter and potentially destroy your painting when it's being shipped. That's why I use plexiglass. It's lighter. You don't have to worry about it shattering and breaking. And as far as protection from UV goes, it is equal or better than glass, because you can get some special UV plexiglass that will protect even more than regular plexiglass does, which already is fine. So, yeah, glass is, I mean, if you're not going to ship it anywhere, and if you're just going to keep it in a place that doesn't have a ton of sunlight, then glass is just fine. But because I'm moving my paintings around, sending them to different places, I need to be more careful about that. Yeah, I have fun doing both the loose and the tight work, and it's good for me to switch back and forth. And doing too much botanical work just makes my arms tired, makes my hands tired, because I grip my brushes so tightly when I do that. And my fantasy work is somewhere in between that. It's not quite as intense as the botanical, but it's not the super loose. It has elements of the loose stuff in it. So this is my newly filled palette. Some of you may have been here with me last week when I filled it. And all the colors that I have newly selected to go into it. Do they make polycarbonate to use it in eyeglasses? It has built-in UV and anti-scratch and pretty shatterproof. I would assume they call it, there's regular plexiglass, which protects pretty well, and then they have UV plexi, which does more, and then they have museum quality plexi, which I assume is probably that. They probably just use a different name for it, but I don't know for certain, and I'm just making a complete guess and assumption there right now. So it has actually been an hour. I usually stop after an hour. I'll do a little bit more because I did say I was going to do a little bit of painting here. And let me start and stop this live stream. So I'm gonna end this one just so that I have it saved. And then I'm gonna start up another one. So if you want to join me again in just like 2 or 3 minutes, the new one should pop up. Got that?